Welcome to another season of Ernestly Speaking with your host, Ernest Owens, myself. So I'm so happy to be back. It's been a great time. I mean, this year has been really crazy thus far. It's a new year. So much is going on. It's like so much I can't even keep up. But one of the things that I've been thinking about lately has been about this idea of having, new allies and friends, people supporting, causes. And everyone, this year wants to be a part of something that they don't know anything about, for better or for worse, And it's interesting because, I'm a part of like a lot of different communities. And so there's always this term of allies, people who, want to support an issue, that isn't about them, but they still care enough to do it because they really want to show, their support and diversity and all this stuff that they think makes them look good. I mean, you see it with the pandering of presidential candidates. All of a sudden, everyone's, pro-marriage equality, pro-LGBT rights, pro-Black Lives Matter, all these different, types of things that gets everyone feeling, like they're, up with the times. But, for this particular episode, I'm really interested in, wondering, what makes a good ally? Or when are allies not doing good? Or when are people, taking it too far? I think this year with the election season, there's been a lot of people, talking about, causes and trying to be the spokesperson for causes that are just a little, they take it a little too far. They're not really hitting the right margin. Or there's just something off about it, And it's crazy because, as someone who is on the, front end of issues pertaining to Black Lives Matter and causes for that, it's funny how there are allies who are maybe non-Black that try to latch onto those issues, and they don't realize that sometimes they're making the issues, more about them rather than really about the issue at hand. So I had one time I went to a protest, and this guy, he was white, and he was talking about, how everyone should get together and unify. And then he makes this blanket statement saying, well, we're all Africans, so, we really should be together. I'm like, how African is it? You're not the country. Yes, prior origins have come from the continent, but no one's looking at you and stopping you and saying, oh, I'm not going to, be racist towards him because he's got some African in him and he's looking like, Nicole Kidman. So it's really about trying to figure out how do we create better environments or situations where we can let people that want to help us, good, help us, but don't, upstage and don't misrepresent the cause, So I was curious and asked to know if anyone had any experiences where they've dealt with, allies for different groups they're part of, and how has that been an issue? Anyone who's had those experiences? Come up. Hi, what's your name?
Alyssa.
Hi, Alyssa. Great to be on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
Wonderful. So what experiences have you had with allies or, some crazy issues and scenarios?
So just personally, something that I witnessed, I wouldn't say it's a firsthand experience, is I remember when the whole Paris attacks happened and there was the big social movement and changing your profile picture on Facebook, and people really tried to personalize the issue by saying, well, I've been to Paris and, I've had someone die there, and I was just there last week and I know someone who did that. But it's not about that you knew someone or that you were just there last week. This is a real a tragic accident that happened, and I think people feel like just because they changed their Facebook profile picture that it made them part of it, and it made them, well, I'm here and I'm supporting you. But do you really know what's going on in Paris? Do you really know how it's affecting them over there just because, you are familiar with the city that it happened, or you don't know? Do you really take on what's really happening over there? And is you changing your profile picture really make you a part of the movement to kind of cater to the accident?
Right. Thank you. That's a good point. Thank you. So we're talking about Facebook activists, Facebook, people who think changing their profile picture, changing the filter, all of a sudden they're an expert on issues. I do remember that time with Paris, and it was frustrating because for me it was like, I've never been to Paris, I've never been to Europe. I've been to Africa, I've been to Peru, I've been to Israel, but I've never been to, Paris. And so it felt awkward how all of a sudden all these people do, and they say, oh, this is a way of me showing solidarity. But it's just a filter. It's not really, anything, there's no message attached to it. Unless you have relatives that's been affected by it in Paris, then it may be a little bit more, it may mean a little bit more. So I felt in a different way that people in that case were doing, kind of, it was like insincere. And I think that's what it's about. It's like, when being an ally, there's moments where I feel like, is there real sincerity there, or is it just pandering? And there's a difference between pandering and being sincere. I think a lot of times people, if you're in a situation, this is all for all allies out there, people that are for causes, especially, white cisgender men who are in the bulk of privilege in American society. Like this is the number one way that you can, in my opinion, think that, allies, need to check themselves. One, does the issue revolve around you when you're making the statement? So do you bring it to yourself in some kind of way? A good example would be, well, with the Paris situation that Melissa just gave us as an example, if you put the picture up and you're putting aside for Paris, are you only caring because you like the food? You thought, that, you like taking a picture with the Eiffel Tower, so that's why you care? Is that your relationship to it? If you didn't like Paris, for example, does it mean that you just don't put the flag up, or you don't care about the lives, you don't say anything about it because of your personal issues with it? That's one. The second, I think, is really something else even more unique. Do you only do it in times of convenience, when it's trendy? Who was talking about, Paris, before those attacks happened? Who was talking about, mass incarceration before there was a book about it? Who was talking about, racism when it wasn't necessarily on the national news or on CNN, like on a regular basis? I really measure people's sincerity when it's not convenient, when it's not glossy, when it's not fashionable. It's something to really take into mind. And I'm wondering if other people have other recommendations for people in their circles, in their social circles. Like, what are some things that you wish you could tell allies or people that about these issues? Anyone? Yes? Come. Great. It's really interesting. I think it's a really cool topic. Just thinking, oh my gosh, I love this. I'm not so fashion for it. What's your name?
My name's Lori.
Hi. Tell us about you. How are you enjoying yourself today?
Yeah, you?
Yeah, definitely. So tell us about what's some recommendations or some, experiences that you feel on this topic.
I'd say try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and if this issue is really important to you, would you really want someone speaking over you on that and trying to put words in your mouth as opposed to listening to you and helping cater to your needs?
Right. So, for example, when do you ever feel like you were talking about a specific topic and someone upstaged you for any reason?
Specifically, with feminism and stuff, a lot of times in my classes, men are like, well, how does this help me? Well, it's feminism. It's going to help everyone, but why does it need to help you for you to support it?
Right. And so how did you, what did you say in those moments, or what's some of the things that happened?
Well, a lot of girls are outraged, and we all kind of pointed out that women have been treated so poorly in the past, centuries, so why do we have to continue to cater to men just for our movement to get some recognition?
Good to know. Thank you. Thanks. It's crazy. Feminism, it's true. That's a really good example of how you can see situations where we're talking about equality for women and the gender and just gender equality overall. And here's an opportunity where someone has a voice and you should be in the position of listening or learning. I think allies sometimes are too busy trying to be experts rather than actually trying to listen and learn. Part of being a good ally, I think, is listening. Part of someone that cares. If you care about a cause that you don't know anything about, regardless of if it's something that's a social issue or whatever, I think a good example is I donate to a lot of different charities and groups. And sometimes, I'm, interested, so I'll donate money, but my money doesn't speak for itself. It doesn't necessarily have a new book, or it doesn't necessarily have a new, it doesn't mean anything. It's a token of appreciation, of solidarity, but it doesn't make me the expert. So someone says, oh, you donate to the, Make-A-Wish Foundation. I don't know about all the different issues, or St. Jude's Children's Hospital. I don't know about all the chronic illnesses that children have. I care about it, but I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm the spokesperson. I don't want to put myself in a position where all of a sudden, if someone knocked on my door and said, hey, Ernest, we noticed you donated $200 to St. Jude's, so tell us about these childhood illnesses. I wouldn't know what to say. And part of it is that because I have an invested interest, it doesn't no longer mean that just because I say I support it, or I take a picture, or I use a hashtag, because everyone loves to use hashtags nowadays. Everyone's like, stand with PP, Planned Parenthood. And no one even knows what it's about. Like a good example is I was, having a conversation with a friend about Planned Parenthood, and they say, well, I just think a woman should have a right to have an abortion. I was like, that's true. But that's not all that Planned Parenthood does. That's like a big misperception, but he was putting a hashtag, hashtag stand with PP because every woman should have an abortion. And that was all he said. And of course, people on Twitter were like, saying, oh, so this is what you think about Planned Parenthood? This is the only thing Planned Parenthood does? And I'm like, clearly that's not the case. But because he didn't do his research, because he didn't take the time to use Google, which I don't understand why people don't use Google. It's like in 2016, it's like you can just Google these things. Like look it up. You'll find out there's other issues and other things and causes they fight for, but everyone wants to just get in a moment and trend. It's weird. It's like the filters. It's like the moment you see it's like that, almost like with the marriage equality. It was that big moment where it was like the rainbow thing and everyone was changing their filters to like the rainbow color for the faces and everything. And it was interesting because a lot of the people that did that, I was like, I don't necessarily think you realize why you changed your color rainbow. Like, do you know what happened? Some people don't even know what happened at it. It's like, oh, it's for pride. I'm like, okay, that's fine, sure. And it's frustrating. So it's one of those moments where I really want people to really step outside themselves, to really think about the causes and issues. Like sometimes you can be a toxic ally. I think people don't know what that means to be, that you can be for a movement but be detrimental to a movement at the same time. I don't think people really know that sometimes being the spokesperson or not being fully informed can actually, take a community and a group like several steps back rather than forward if you're coming at the wrong way. A good example of that is I think, if you look at Black Lives Matter, there's so many different people getting involved. And it's great to see, a diverse group of people coming from different places involved. I mean, that's wonderful, right? But I'm so over just cosmetic, diversity in the sense of just because it visually looks diverse, intellectually, financially, socially, all of those, educationally, do you see, the diversity in that space? So you have a group of people in a room together, and they're like, you have a white guy, you'll have, someone from a different, part of the country apart, and it's like a different group talking about these issues. And then you start looking and you're observing, and when you start hearing what they're saying and why they care, it's, oh, I have black friends. That's why, I care about Black Lives Matter, because I have black friends. It's like, okay, having black friends, that's good. You have friends, you're friends with people outside of just your social circle. That's wonderful. But do you want to talk about, privilege? Do you want to talk about systemic inequality? Do you want to talk about, the fact that in many ways, just your mere existence can in many ways be taken as an affront to the causes and issues of others? Are you willing to admit that somewhere along your, family lineage or your neighbors that you live and know or people that's related to you that they're doing things that in many ways can be oppressing others? No one wants to think about that. Everyone wants to say, no, we should all just be friends. Like, it's just, I wish it was that easy. I just wish it was that easy. Everyone's like, oh, I'm a peace person, or I don't believe in any race. I believe in one race, the human race. I'm like, okay, yeah. I wish I could say that, when I was walking down the street. Oh, I'm a part of the human race, so I can never be affected by racism. The number one thing, I think, in any case when it deals with issues pertaining to race or anything like that, or feminism, like was mentioned earlier, is this idea of complete blindness, is when they say I'm colorblind. Anyone who tells, that's the number one, one of the top, it has to be, to me it's the number one pet peeve, is when I hear people say, I'm colorblind. And most of the time, the people that say they're colorblind are people that are white. They're never black or a Latino of color. No one of color ever says they're colorblind, because when they look in the mirror, they're like, well, if I'm colorblind, I don't see myself. But it's deep. Like, when someone says, I'm colorblind, it's like, it's a pacifier way of not talking about the issues. It's like saying, I want to be in a situation where I just want to be in a room and I just don't want to talk about it anymore. So we're just going to act like racism doesn't happen. We want to act like misogyny, sexism doesn't happen. We want to act like all of these things do not happen. The patriarchy doesn't exist. It's like when you say things are colorblind or gender blind, it's just like, I don't see it anymore, I don't hear it, and because I don't see it, poof, it's done. I mean, that's how people think. People really think like that. People really think when they're talking about race that they could just say, I'm a colorblind person, I don't see race, I don't see color. But then the joke is, when it's time to apply for schools, jobs, neighborhoods, oh, you see color then. I don't want to go to that neighborhood. It's sketchy. What makes it sketchy? Well, it's just a lot of different people there. What kind of people? You dig and you pull those layers back, and you begin to realize, Or, I have friends who go to cafeteria settings or dining malls or restaurants, and you'll see a group of people at a table, and it's like a predominant group. They're laughing and chatting. Oh, I don't like this. Why? Oh, those people are so loud over there. What people? And it's interesting where you look at different crowds, how people will colorize segments. So the loud group, when it's a group of black people laughing and being loud, all of a sudden it's crazy. But no one ever thinks about the BYOBs or the football games or the bars you go to, the Super Bowl, that just recently happened, how many people just went crazy. And no one ever questions race then. No one ever says anything. You go to college campus like Penn or Temple, when the kids are going crazy at the basketball games and the football games, and people are drunk and acting crazy, no one's ever scared then. So there's no such thing as being colorblind. I mean, you can't be colorblind unless you're, genetically colorblind, but even then, you can still look at features and tell who's who and what's what. So I think it's important that during this time and era, in this day and age, when we're looking at allies, we gotta hold them more accountable. Even the ones that are for pro-LGBT issues. And everyone wants to jump on the pro-LGBT banner. Everyone's like, oh, I'm for equal rights and things. And then you start asking the questions about parties. Well, everyone's a feminist. Now everyone's these issues. If you're in college campus, you're like, okay, well, are you gendering prices? Does guys get in for $20,000? Do guys get in for $20,000 and women get in free all night? When you look at the flyers, how do you advertise the flyers for events? You put all these supermodels and bikinis on the flyers and say, ooh, ladies' night tonight. What makes it ladies' night? What makes it ladies' night? Do anyone ever ask those questions? What makes it ladies' night? What makes it all of a sudden ladies' night in a room where you are about, gender equality and, what makes it ladies' night? Why is it ladies' night? You don't know? You don't know? You? No? You don't know? But you went though, right? You trying to figure out. You said, I want to know, is it roses for me at the door? Sometimes they give away freebies for women. Some things that are monetarily free, some things not. But it's the reality of all these things, even the conversations around diversity. When people say, oh, I want to have more diverse, people. I want to have a diverse room. But when you're looking at the leadership, when you're looking at the people that's having the positions, when you look at the people that actually can speak in the room and who can't speak in the room, it doesn't get diverse then, right? It's like, we'll have you there, but we're not asking you to actually have any ideas there. Or if you do have an opinion, or you do have something to say, that's when everyone's kind of looking at you like, uncomfortable. Or they get a little, weird, or it becomes, an issue when it doesn't exist. Like, they say, oh, give us your thoughts, tell us everything, express yourself. And then you start expressing yourself. Why are you complaining? Why is everything so bad? You're so negative. It's so controversial. This is just too much. Then they get uncomfortable. Then everybody wants to then, act as though, their whole perception was different than what it was. Then everyone wants to exasperate the issue. It's like anything that isn't about them then becomes, something more. And that's what it is about being an ally, is that in many ways, when you're in a position where you're getting into a front. So for me, I guess, I'm a part of many marginalized communities. I'm not a woman, but I consider myself a feminist. But I try to think to myself, if you're creating a panel or any type of event, or you're doing anything around that topic, it's important to include other people in that topic and basically let them have the mic. You can't be the only expert, when it comes to issues that's not pertaining to yourself. And it doesn't mean that you back away from either. A lot of times people say if they can't be an ally the way they want to, they just don't want to be a part of the cause. I've heard people say to me several times, they say, well, the way that you guys are coming in on our necks about what we should do and what we should say, it just makes people don't want to be a part. Well, guess what? You not choosing to support Black Lives Matter or gender equality, if you're not supporting it, then you're basically helping those issues to persist. So you have to make a conscientious choice to yourself and ask yourself the question, if I'm not helping in any way, and if I'm not willing to check my privilege or check myself in situations that are not about me, then in reality, all hope's lost. We've failed ourselves as a community, as a society, if we don't at all open ourselves up to the thing of saying it doesn't have to be about myself all the time. And then when it's not, I'm opening myself up. It's about being considerate. I mean, does anyone, have any thoughts about, ways in which, they've been on the receiving end of being an ally or not being an ally, or what have they learned in the process, either whether you're on the feminist side, the receiving end, or not the receiving end? I'm curious to know your thoughts. Oh, hi. Hi. What's your name?
Keisha Lee.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So what I think about the way that allies approach certain situations, I think it's detrimental to themselves and to the cause, because they're approaching it in a way that is so mainstream that it doesn't allow people to see the actual problem. And that's because I think that people, especially in this country, are so focused on themselves and their lives that they are not willing to look at another person's life and how terribly they are living because of a situation that's going on. So I think that allies, what they do is that they make something mainstream and something for the public to connect to themselves, because they don't want to see the real problem because they're scared of what they will see.
It's real. Thank you. Wow. It's very true. I mean, when you're really thinking about it, it's like, wow, when you're thinking about the idea of this idea of mainstream, which is a really good point, is that have causes become so mainstream and so commercial that the value of what it was really about has been lost. We'll get into this, some more episodes, but, when I think about capitalism, the role that capitalism plays in these type of events, the mainstreamness, like the buy the t-shirt and the have the thing. And I think there was one time, I think a year ago, where I was hearing about a protest and Al Sharpton was there and there was these front row tickets at the who gets in the front of the line at a protest in New York? It was in New York, and it was this big, huge Black Lives Matter protest or something along it, and it was some tickets. And there were certain people that could be at the front of the demonstration, and those who didn't have their tickets, they couldn't be at the front, they couldn't get the mic. It was so, market. It's like a market-based, ideology behind it. Like, who sits here? Who sits there? It's like, this is, really? That's what you would have to say. Really? Is this really, okay, so I'm getting a front row ticket to the protest, y'all. Don't mind me. I'm getting a front row ticket. So, in reality, it's when you're thinking about those issues, it's like, now money plays a role into it. Now, if you, did you get your Black Lives Matter t-shirt? You didn't get your t-shirt? You're not about that life. You're not an activist. Real activists buy the t-shirt. Or I have the hoodie. Or I was at the front. We've now quantified activism, and we've quantified allyship, right? It's like, okay, if you, don't like it was this one guy who told me, he says, I'm for gay causes, I'm for LGBT issues and everything. I like that Macklemore Same Love song. I play that all the time. And it's a lot, just work with me here. And I'm listening to myself and I hear this and I'm just like, so this is like a checkoff list, right? I listen to Kendrick Lamar. Okay. It's just those moments where you hear people say these things and they think that makes them, it's trendy now. It's like, oh, it's trendy. It's kind of like how people have made, cornrows and kale and greens now become trendy, or micro beads and jewelry accessories and nose rings and all these little things they do that says it's exotic, it's ethnic, it's cultural, it's all these things. We have to be mindful, about the things that we say, and even allies, and that's about us really putting them in check. Because sometimes I think we're scared. Sometimes, I'm not scared, clearly, but it's about not being scared to confront and put people in check. When you hear allies or people say things that's out of line, the biggest thing in feminism is slut shaming. There's a lot of people that's about feminism, but they're not for the right reasons. They'll say things like, I'm standing up for the real good, classy women. The woman that's not classy, I don't support the woman that's not classy. I'm like, well, what a classy woman? How do you look at that? And then you start having to push them on that, and then you realize that it's only into the respectability politics. It's like, well, he's a decent black man. He's a decent, X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, how do you, so now we are we're making, compartments. So it's really about really confronting people on, those double standards, or if there are things they're saying that doesn't make sense, or they're using words that doesn't make sense, where they say things like, oh, I don't believe, some black people are racist, but I still love them. No, this is wrong. So in our reality, I think it's about, at the end of the day, finding a place where you can, just learn how to hold people accountable, teach people, and at the same time, get some stuff done. Because at the end of the day, all of these people that want to be sponsors and go-getters and thumbs up people, it's only so much you can do. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. Thank you.